and I'm here to talk today about palliative paranormal perspectives. The reason why I'm talking about this is because we are currently facing a end of life crisis in how we deal with our death and dying. We know this. That's why we're all here today, and we know that we can do death better. What we're noticing is that at end of life, we are talking about the physicalities, we're talking about life trajectories, we're talking about what to physically do with the body after it's dead. What we're not talking about is the psycho-spiritual, social aspects of what happens when we go through the process of death and dying. I'm uniquely suited to talk about this topic because I have been at 30% on the palliative performance chart. I have rebuilt my body since then. I'm now at around 70%. So,
Quick question about the palliative performance chart.
Yes.
Like, what does that look like, function-wise?
Okay, well, at 30%, what you're looking at is you have basic functionality. So you can still have autonomy over your bodily. So basically, you can go pee by yourself without, assistance. You can go to the bathroom by yourself. But at that point in my health, I was basically conscious for maybe about 4 hours a day. And at that point in my healthcare, I was in bed for 24 hours of the day. And at that point in my healthcare, I couldn't stand for any more than like 2-3 minutes. And at that point in my health, I couldn't even get myself dressed. I needed help with so many things. I couldn't make my own food, I couldn't take care of my daughter. So now, my body is rebuilding itself. So I've got a unique perspective into what palliative looks like. And what we talk about is how the soul will transition over time. So what happened to me, as opposed to a different sort of near-death experiencer who has a sort of brush with death, a sudden instance that they feel their soul sucked up and then pulled back in. I had a different perspective with my near-death experience, which was I ended up feeling the time change. I ended up feeling the liminal space. I ended up feeling my soul pulling away from my body sheath. And I felt my soul going back into my body sheath. And so this is a different way of talking about our near-death experiences than what we're talking about. In this, I got to witness firsthand something that I've been experiencing my whole life. Since I was a little girl, I've been able to sense and feel the souls of the dead around me. And I've been able to interact with them through prayer, through energy work, through singing and meditation. I'm able to connect with them. So all of this leads me to my current work, which is I'm a Thana doula, which is somebody who is an end-of-life caregiver, but I specifically relate to the spiritual aspects of the work. So like I said earlier, we're facing this spiritual crisis around how we're dealing with death and dying. People are dying in institutions, away from their families, away from their support networks, and how do we connect with those souls? How do we make sure that they travel safely? How do we make sure that they're taken care of on the other side of the veil? This is what we're currently working at. So right now, I'm running groups with people who are from all over the world, and we're just teaching people these skills that there are souls out there, that they can be interacted with, that they do interfere with our life. But if we're not acknowledging them, they're getting stuck. How can we move them on? And so this is a big part of the work that I'm here to do, is to educate people around this word psychopomp. And like I said, it's a very simple concept. It's something that has transferred across time, generations, and religious practices. There's always been this idea of the angel of death, somebody who's there to help escort you from this place to the next. And so this is a large part of my work. How it plays out with the living is it actually transfers over well, because what we talk about is how the family processes that grief. If the grief is stuck inside the individual family members, they're going to be holding that soul from moving properly. So what we need to do is really address and grieve the grief instead of just holding it. So once we start grieving the grief, we start moving that soul along. But again, we need to acknowledge what that feels like, and our society really doesn't do this well. So we need to start having these bigger conversations about, you know, what do we individually feel like happens to us at end of life? What do we feel like happens to us collectively at end of life? And how can we start having these conversations about, you know, like, what sort of spiritual things do you need to do for yourself at end of life to make sure that you are having the best journey? You know, we can talk about that through meditation, we can talk about that through art, we can talk about that through, you know, just processing the emotions around death and dying. But we need to start having these conversations. And it's up to us to decide what that looks like individually for ourselves, because our souls are individuals. We are here to experience our own particular journey, and nobody else can tell us what our end of life will look like. So we can have all these trajectories and doctors telling us what to do and what it looks like, and you know, at the end of life we pay this much for this package for, you know, our funeral, and we can talk about all of those things, but we still need to be talking about the essence of what we're birthing. Because death is a birth. You're birthing yourself into a new way of being without a body. And when we start having these conversations, what does that look like for the individual soul? Some of us are comfortable with having these conversations, some of us are not. And that's just something that you can work with, you can ease into, but it's something that we need to start talking about now, not at end of life. We need to start talking about this stuff as early as possible, and having these conversations with our children and with our loved ones. And, you know, like, it can be just as simple as, like, I really like this song, I want it played as I transition. It doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be something that is solid for you and your soul. Does anybody have any questions?
Where does the word psychopomp come from?
It's Greek.
It's
Greek.
okay.
And it comes from two words, psyche, which is the soul,
Okay.
and pomp, which is the leader of the procession or the conductor. So it's basically like the person who leads the soul to the next land. I commonly refer to it as cat bus, because what it feels like to me is I will drive by hospitals, I will drive by nursing homes, I will drive by palliative places, and I will start picking up souls. They'll just like climb aboard like it's a bus. And I will go home and I will do my process, I'll do my rituals for them, and they will travel on to the next place. But it took me a really long time to understand what was going on. And for a long time, because our society doesn't want to talk about this, I thought I was crazy. Not crazy. There are people worldwide who have experienced this phenomenon. There are people in my life that I know personally who have experienced this phenomenon. So it's not just me.
So what was the word you called it? Something bus?
Cat bus, because my name's Kat.
Oh,
Because my
okay.
name's Kat, so I call it a cat bus. So it's just like all aboard, you know, and that's how it feels for me. And so what will happen is I'll go home and I'll light a candle and I'll sing, and the souls will start coming out of me and journeying on. And so I tend to collect them and then process them later. There are other people who work completely differently than me, but who are also still psychopomps, but they sit bedside. They need to sit bedside, they need to interact one-on-one with the client. I don't, but that's me. There are many ways to do this work, and there are many different experiences of this work. Like, I know people who have experienced a psychopomp experience, but they don't feel that they are actually called to be a psychopomp. So what this means is that they have witnessed the paranormal, they have seen it, they have felt an experience, and I'm gonna share something that happens at death cafes, is I'll go, and invariably, after I say what I do and I explain what a psychopomp is, I will have 4 or 5 little old ladies standing in a lineup saying, this happened to me 40 years ago. I had this experience, and you know, like my best friend died, and then I felt this like, ugh, and then I just like, I don't know why, but I had to go over to the window and open it up. And I'm like, yes, that's very common. Like, you are picking up on a wisdom that is carried inside of our DNA. You're picking up on something that we've done traditionally through generations that we need to do to acknowledge this soul's passing. We need to find it a way to journey. And so these people have had these experiences, and while they're not technically psychopomps, they've still witnessed the paranormal. And paranormal is just anything that is outside of those 5 senses, because those are the only 5 that we're allowed to talk about in our society. It doesn't mean that there aren't other senses.
So how does the opening of the window, is that the same as lighting the candle and singing? It just allows the soul to move on?
It's an energy thing. It's something that we've done culturally for a long time, but where it specifically comes from, I don't know. But windows are portals. So what we're talking about in each of these cases are portals. So opening the window is a portal. Lighting a candle is creating an energy vortex, which creates that. I use a portal through my voice. So I'll start channeling a song when I feel like there's a bunch of souls. I will start channeling a song, and they'll start following the vocal, the sound waves, and journey on the sound waves. And I've had a psychic who is not a psychopomp, but who is a psychic and who can witness stuff. She had me on her radio show, and she's like, I just saw 5 souls just fly out of your body. And I'm like, yes, this is how it works for me. So every psychopomp works differently, but we're all working towards the same goal of liberating stuck or lost souls.
May I try and incorporate this into my worldview? Because this is something that, as a nurse, I was trained to like look away from anything that was not physical, right? That was not 5 sensory evidence-based. But I come from a culture where there's all these rites and rituals around like honoring somebody after they passed that are like, my mom doesn't know where they come from, but there's these things that we do like a month after somebody passes, and we have to hold them in like, have to hold space for their memory or whatnot. And to me, as I've worked with different people from different cultures, this is like worldwide, you know, there's so many different cultures that have rituals around honoring somebody after they have died and left the physical world. So when worldview wise, I think there's like extremes. There's like earth world, which we are born to, which is all physical. Mm-hmm. And if we go on the principle that everything is energy, and earth and all our 5 senses is just like the most physical, dense energy that we have access to, would souls then be like, could they be like a form of energy, a form of vibration? Absolutely. I guess, because I'm trying to, I've never, like, I think I kind of get it, but for me, when I think of like people see souls, or they have like, or they have awareness, I'm almost expecting to see like poofs or like Casper the Friendly Ghosts or whatnot, yes. Right? I'm expecting to see something physical.
Yes.
But if I step back and I go like, what if it's a feeling? What if it's an energy? Because there are studies out there that, you know, measure people right before they have died and after the moment after they've died, and
21 grams.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly, 21 grams, right? So if it's energy, then there must be different ways of each of us has of being able to see, feel, and appreciate souls.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
Does that make sense?
I believe we all
energy?
have the ability to feel and sense this. It's palpable, it's everywhere. It exists inside of our culture. We're walking through a whole society, a whole world of previously, you know, like, compared to the living people on the planet, there's way more of the dead than there are of the living. So we're constantly walking in this soup of previously held energies, previously thought of ideas, previously created paradigms. And so what we have to do now is address that individually.
You just blew my mind.
I know, right?
You just blew my tiny little mind.
So, returning to source is basically getting like so light and so like, boop.
Yes.
You're like not.
Yes.
So it's not even like not being visible or sensory. It's like zoop.
Yes. And that's the thing. What ends up happening is when somebody dies, the energy starts pulling in from the extremities. The energy starts pulling and condensing into a small ball, you know, small energy source. And then that's why, you know, the extremities get cold first, you know.
That's peripheral vascular circulation is shutting down.
Exactly, all of that. Yeah. And so the reason why, and again, part of the sensories that start to shut down, the last sense that actually shuts down is auditory. So like you can still be non-responsive, but still here. That's so that we can prepare you, even if you're not tangibly all there, we can still prepare you psychologically to undergo the rest of your journey. Like that's what we're supposed to be doing culturally at that time. We're not, we've lost that. So now we need to pull that back into our awareness, our consciousness, our understanding.
Because we've forgotten that we are souls.
Yes.
Yeah.
We haven't forgotten. I always think it's almost become unfashionable to talk about it, because especially in the West, it's all about time and money. If you can't make it pay, then it isn't really something that's considered, because you just have to look at all the tangible stuff that's not regarded because it doesn't contribute to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've actually had that conversation a few times today at this event. You know, like people have asked me, how much do I make? I'm like, well, the dead don't really have pockets. You know, like the souls that are journeying, they come to me because they know that I'm a portal. They know that I'm a doorway that will allow that energy to flow. But they don't have pockets to pay me. What I'm here to do, in a lot of ways, is just to educate the public that this is a factor in all of our dying, in every person's dying. And how can we address that as an individual? Creating autonomy and agency at end of life. How do we do that in a spiritual way that acknowledges what your life journey has been about, who you are as a person, and what kind of transition you want to go into? And for me, I've started creating like playlists. These are the songs that nurture me, that I want to hear when I'm transitioning. This is the type of room that I want to be in, you know, as I'm transitioning. This is, you know, the essential oil that I feel most connected to. There are so many ways of dealing with this energy, but we need to start addressing it at an individual level as opposed to our systemic, institutionalized levels, like I said, palliative care, hospice care, nursing homes, and et cetera, where we're treated like a cookie cutter model. How do we create the individual, create space for that soul to journey safely?
Well, and if I may interject, like you said earlier, having these conversations earlier, because once you get to hospice, it's too little, too late.
Yes.
There's no time or space to have those conversations. People feel too sick. Families in crisis. It should have been done much earlier.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing, is that at end of life, there's a lot of family dynamics that come into play. And I'm gonna put this out there, a lot of the inner child comes out at end of life. A lot of our woundedness of our inner child comes out at end of life. So we tend to cling to those things that were really important to us as children, as opposed to what is important to us now. So again, if you're having this ongoing dialogue of like, this is who I am, this is what I want, and this is how I'm gonna go forward to get that, then you have a much clearer, you know, understanding of how to go forward in this paradigm. But we don't really ask those questions because, again, like you said, it really has to do with money and how much we make and what our home looks like and, you know, what size screen TV do we have, and these types of things that we're told are important but really aren't.
the risk of offending you, just because I feel like my mind right now is literally, you blew my mind. So what are one or two takeaways that you want us to have when we leave the room today? I just feel like I need to ground this into something a little bit concrete.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to walk under a bus and go, what?
Fair enough. And I'm not offended by that at all.
Okay.
Okay, so one or two takeaways from this are, I want people to start thinking about agency and autonomy instead of institutions. So what does your autonomous, free soul, what does it need to feel respected? And how do you need to craft that into your end-of-life wishes to make sure that your soul feels satisfied when it wants to leave? Because again, a lot of the reason why souls get stuck are because of unacknowledged grief, unhealed trauma, and, you know, lack of understanding that the soul has a process that it goes through. Did that answer your question?
So basically, what does your soul need to feel respected so it can move on unfettered when the time comes?
Yes. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's going to be different for each person, because right now we're dealing with death on an institutional level, not on an individual level. So if you know what your inner child is kind of like buttoned up against, you can create space and safety so that your inner child isn't triggered out the wazoo, you know, and then it can travel easier. We don't understand how all of these pieces come together yet. Quantum physics is getting kind of close at understanding how these pieces come together, but we're not fully there yet. And so we really have to rely on our individual wisdom around this piece right now, around creating peace for ourselves.
And wisdom that we're recouping right now and it's been acknowledged and almost lost.
Yeah.
So you mentioned autonomy. So what does agency mean in regards to this? You said agency and autonomy.
Okay, so autonomy is like my own personal self, my own personal energy and how it interacts with the world.
Right.
And agency is more of like making sure that you're respected. Is that Joan?
Agency?
Is for me what agency brings to mind, correct or not, is the ability to actually vocalize your wishes and have them
Thank you.
filled out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so agency is just more of like the understanding around the piece. Yeah. And autonomy is getting that met through your own means.
It's almost like autonomy is self-knowledge and agency is capacity, something like that?
Yes, that would
Yeah.
make sense, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Because I know that we've talked about this before.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, absolutely.
If agency and autonomy, like if there's awareness around this transitioning the soul, is the time between the soul actually like cleanly leaving earth realm into like source energy, is that shortened? So, like how
Again,
does time factor in?
time works different on the other side. That's the reality. This is the 100% reality that I have learned through going through all of these different processes, is that each soul will travel for the time that it needs to travel for. Time isn't the question.
Yeah.
It's about ties. It's
about
about
ties.
connections. So if the soul needs to journey for 45 years, it'll journey for 45 years. If a soul needs to journey for 2 days, it'll journey for 2 days. But it's how intense those 2 days or 40 days or 4 years are. That's the measure that we're talking about here. Because again, time is liminal. We don't have the same concept of time. And I noticed that when I was at 30% on the palliative performance chart, I noticed that I wasn't aware of time passing in the same way. I noticed that you know, things moved at a different rate. And I was like, what is going on? And I didn't realize how sick I was. And it was only like 3 years later that I realized that I was at 30% of the palliative performance chart. So it's tricky because I'm aware of what I went through and I'm aware of other people's near-death experiences, and I know that they're drastically different, but I also know that I was brought to bring this information back. So it's time is time. And here it's different than on Venus, and time is different here than on another solar system, and time is different on the other side.
So when you're saying a soul will journey for as long as it needs to, are we talking about the soul will journey in the physical vessel, that it has this time for as long as it needs to, or you're talking about even once the physical vessel has passed, if the soul needs to journey more, it will?
Both, yes, both. I would agree to both of those statements, yes. The soul will stay in the body for as long as it's needed, and it will leave when it's needed, and it will journey for as long as it's needed.
So
And
even if the vessel gives out before the soul has finished its journey, the soul is going to linger.
Yeah. Sorry.
So even if the vessel, even if the body passes before the soul has actually completed the journey, are you saying that, are those the souls that you're picking up and then?
Partially. Because again, we are so death phobic in our society. Yes, I would say yes, those are a large part of the souls that I'm picking up because they're confused. A lot of the souls that I pick up, they are so confused they don't even know that they've died. This is the majority of the souls because they're dying in institutions. The doctors aren't having the end of life conversations. They're not saying you're on a downward trajectory. They're saying, let's try this. Let's give you this hope. Let's do this thing. Let's try this. Oh, there's one more experimental thing that we can do. But none of it is actually saying, you're on terminal decline. Start preparing yourself mentally. We're not having that conversation.
The doctors have it with the family, they don't have it with the patient.
Sometimes they don't even have it with the family.
Oh, okay, that was my experience.
Yeah, sometimes they don't even have it with the family. So like, it's really weird. At end of life, we've got this weird society thing that happens, and I don't really know what to do with that piece other than to have more conversations, breakout conversations like these, where, you know, the word is at least being introduced, the concept is being introduced, that there is a spiritual need for souls to be taken care of, in not just the body and not just the after effects of like what we need to do for the funeral. We actually need to start talking about what that person in the bed is experiencing, what they need, how can we provide that, and how can we support them on the rest of their journey. You know, sometimes all that the soul needs is just to be, you know, told, hi, I see you, you're respected, it's time for you to move on. It's simple as that, but we're not
What does that
quite
look like?
doing
How
that.
do you tell this?
May I just interject shortly? Now, Kat, you're the last presenter here. You're welcome to stay.
Okay.
But I do want to just close and at this point say thank you so much for bringing in your expertise on this pioneering subject, courageous conversations, and to say thank you from
Aw.
Surrey Hospice.
Thank you.
Kat?
Thank you, my dear. Much love.
Yeah, great to see you.